Welcome to Freedom Friday's lucky 13th episode. You feeling lucky today, Dale?
I feel lucky every day.
In my quest to figure out the whys and hows of voter participation in our country, I have a very special guest with me today to discuss how the military handles this civic responsibility. Welcome, Dale. Good job picking out the shirts for today. I think this is our first set of matching shirts in our 32-year history together. And they're just not matching enough to be okay, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get right to it with a bit of your background. Tell me about your first experience with voting.
I remember my very first election. It was the 1980 presidential election, and there were a lot of things going on in the country at that time. There was the energy crisis that had long lines to wait for gas. There was the boycott of the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow because it was at the height of the Cold War, and we had the Iran hostage crisis going on. And it was also the first time I really remember the presidential candidates because they were kind of both celebrities. One was a former actor and governor of California, and one was a peanut farmer. And something I learned later is they actually both were military veterans.
Oh.
Yeah, the day after I turned 18, a friend of mine went down and we registered to vote, registered for our party, and registered for selective service all at the same time on the same day. And then I voted absentee ever since then. For 30 years I voted absentee until I retired from the Army. Right,
yeah. That's an interesting thing about the military is we have it a little different than the rest of the country when it comes to voting. So let's talk about that next. So how is voting in the military handled?
I think every unit in the military has a voting assistance officer. And at the time, the job was to go to every person in the military or in your unit and hand them a postcard to either register to vote or change their address if they wanted to. Now, like all federal employees, you are limited in our political activities you can do. Can't do them in uniform. Even though we push voting in the military, we never really talked about it because it was just kind of a taboo subject because you were kind of prohibited, which is ironic because, you know, the commander-in-chief is an elected official. In fact, the commander-in-chief is the, de facto leader of their party, be it Republican or Democrat.
Right, and I do remember our time in the military that military people, spouses included, are very supportive of the president no matter who the president is, which is quite refreshing. What is the voting process for the military like now?
So nowadays, because of technology and the internet, it couldn't be any easier. So they have a website, fvap.gov, which stands for the Federal Voting Assistance Program. And it's basically a how-to guide to vote for the military. Honestly, I didn't even know it existed until I was researching for this episode, so I'm sure it's still not widely used, or nearly not as much as it should be, but it really couldn't be any easier today.
Right, and we'll make sure we post that for you all in case you're watching and you're military. That's a great resource for you to make sure that you are registered and you can get your absentee ballot. Okay, my next question is, why is it important for military-connected individuals to vote?
So despite all that effort and all that, the tools available, the military still votes at a lower rate than their comparison, age and demographic counterparts. So only about 2/3 of the military vote compared to 80% of their demographic and age. That's who registered to vote. Then voting, about 50% of the military vote, versus about 2/3 of their demographic in the civilian side. And then the most alarming is that out of that half that votes, about 80% of it are people that are stationed in the United States. That's the voting rate of people stationed in the United States, about 80%, which is good. Overseas, it's 8%.
Oh my goodness, that's so low.
Yeah, and why I think it's really important for those that are stationed overseas to vote is because when you have to deploy, generally they're the first ones to deploy into harm's way. So it's really a shame if, those that are most likely to go serve our country overseas are the ones that have the lowest percentage of turnout of votes, so their voice isn't heard.
That is a good point. And I hope that, all of our military get on board with registering and then actually voting. So my next question, I have a lot of questions. How can our viewers get involved?
Well, you've already highlighted many veteran candidates, so what I chose for my impactful donations are 4 nonprofits that help increase military or veteran participation in in political office. So the first one's called Hill Vets. And Hill Vets is, their mission is to get transitioning service members, veterans, and Gold Star family members in positions in congressional or Senate offices that advocate on behalf, generally on behalf of veterans' causes, but causes they believe in. For example, Hill Vets alumni, those that have gone through that program and have positions now in those offices, were key in getting the PAC Act passed, and that was the act that gave veterans benefits for exposure to toxic materials. And as you know, they run a great soiree at the end of every alumni session. I have a great view of Congress. So you
with really, really good cocktails
Very
too.
good
They
cocktails.
throw a good cocktail party at Hill Vets.
They do. All in, all in the
Yes.
name of advocacy for veterans. The other three I kind of grouped together, but the first one's called New Politics. And New Politics' mission is to get veterans actually elected to office. So they run a boot camp where they teach veterans how to fundraise, how to run campaigns, how to develop platforms. I mean, all those things that, don't come naturally to someone who's leaving the service and wants to get into elected office. And then they endorse certain candidates. And then the last two are called With Honor and Vote Vets, but they endorse veterans that they believe have the values, and generally they want to bridge the gap between left and right and find those that can work together.
Thank you for all that great information.
Thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the cocktail, which is one of Dale's favorites. And so I've been making all the cocktails so far on the show, but I have to tell you that I learned all of my cocktail skills from this guy right here. So would you like to make the cocktail today?
I'd love to.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Okay, so for the cocktail today, I'm going to make my favorite, probably the first cocktail I ever learned to make, and probably the first grown-up cocktail I ever drank, even though at the time I did not think it was all that.
I still don't drink grown-up cocktails, apparently.
But we're going to make the old-fashioned today, because I'm an old-fashioned guy, I guess. I don't know. Anyway,
He is.
so it's got rye, and we're going to use Sagamore rye, which is a local rye out of Baltimore, just north of us, and happens to be a favorite rye of me and some of my old-fashioned drinking buddies. We're going to use a sugar, so you can use simple syrup, or you can take a sugar cube and kind of muddle it with some water. Then we're going to use bitters, Angostura bitters. So pretty simple. You take 2 ounces of rye whiskey. Now I use rye instead of bourbon because I don't need my cocktails to be that sweet because I've got Kristen.
I'm the sweetness every day.
Yeah, every day. And then I'm going to use a little bit of simple syrup, and then to kind of add a little flavor, a little profile to this, you put a couple dashes of Angostura bitters in there. I got these little droppers because it's kind of cool. And then, as my dad used to tell me, you wouldn't shake a baby, so why would you shake an old-fashioned? So you stir this thing up.
That sounds like a Harold line.
So you want to stir up that old-fashioned. We'll throw that there in the sink. And then, sorry there, honey.
Yep.
Pour that bad boy over this nice block ice cube. And then, to put a little more flavor profile in there, you've got to stick in a Luxardo cherry, which is the original maraschino cherry. There you have the old-fashioned.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Why don't you have the first sip since it's your favorite?
If you insist.
Yes.
Good as always.
Whew. Let's see how it goes down for me. I'll eat the cherry. That's the sweet part. Actually, that's really smooth.
Nice.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, you're now an old-fashioned girl.
Nice. Hey, thanks for being on the show today, honey.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, he's been there for me the whole way, so thank you for that.
And only 6 more weeks.
I know. So with that, join us next week for a heart-to-heart about your vote in November and a rum remedy called the deathbed. That's a new one for us. Until then, keep getting our citizens registered to vote. And cheers to change a cocktail donation to one of the 4 veterans nonprofits that Dale chose. Thanks, Dale, for it all. Cheers to you.
Thanks, baby. I love you.
But the men stood fast with their guns on their shoulders, not knowing what to do with the contradicting orders. The general said he would do his own duty, but he would extend it no further. The men could go as they pleased, but not a man moved. Their eyes gazed straight ahead, till one by one they stepped back and not a word was said. And the old general was left with his own words echoing in his head. He then prepared to fight. He said, I have seen the others, and I have discovered that this fight is not worth fighting. No, and I've